Hello gamers and operators, my name is Icebergs. Today, I'm going to give you the condensed and conclusive Battlefield 2042 timeline, and all the games that are included within that timeline. Now this is not going to be the story of Battlefield 2042, but the timeline leading up to it. If you want to see the video about the story of Battlefield 2042, I'll put a link right here in the video for you. Anyways, let's dive right in. To start off the timeline, let's talk about the first major conflict in world history, World War I and the consequent Battlefield 1. World War I was started over an assassination, more specifically when a Serbian patriot killed Archduke Ferdinand, the next in line to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, otherwise known as Austria. Within a month, the Austrian army had invaded Serbia and set off a cascade of military alliances to begin taking sides, and as countries took sides, the colonies that were under control of those countries were then pulled into conflict, and was then made a global conflict. Battlefield 1 campaign or war stories show the sheer number of issues within the war. For example, the Storm of Steel mission, where you swap from person to person as they each die, but it shows the problems with World War I, trying to fight conventionally with armies where armies dig in and try to advance by attacking in large numbers. The problem was the advancement of technology, and the invention of artillery and machine guns gave you the ability to kill hundreds of people at a time and not move an inch. Also, quick side note, if you're ever in a situation where artillery is being dropped on you, hit the deck. The explosive impact of a mortar shell is up and out, not a ball of fire like we see with most grenades and most explosives like people imagine. It goes up from the ground and out, so if you're on the ground, chances of you getting hit are a lot less. Anyways, the Battlefield 1 campaign continues through different war stories, such as a member of the tank crew of the Mark V land ship, then to a pilot on a reconnaissance mission, then to Avanti Savoia, I'm not sure how to say that word, but that's close enough, where you're a soldier searching for your brother and you find him and he looks, dead. And then an Australian message runner, and you help out a 17-year-old learn to be a runner and defend yourself, and then you get blown up by artillery. And the final war story is my favorite, just because of the sheer badassery of Lawrence of Arabia. This mission sees you following an ally of Lawrence of Arabia trying to destroy a World War I train, a heavily armored train that's pretty much destroying everything in its way. And then we're kind of brought to the end of World War I. Granted, World War I happened because Germany began to attack passenger and cargo ships belonging to the American forces. America joined the war, helping the Allied forces lead the way and supporting them to victory. This led to the signing of the armistice, and the armistice stated that Germany could never have an offensive power military again, and the only military they could have was in defense, basically protecting their own country from foreign invaders. And as we know from history, that did not turn out the way it was supposed to be. The next conflict and Battlefield games we have are Battlefield 1942, 1943, and Battlefield 5. Technically 1943 had no story, it was only multiplayer, so we will only talk about 1942 and Battlefield 5. World War II, as many of you know, was officially began with September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland from the west. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war on Germany after realizing Germany had broken the rules of the armistice, which had stated Germany would no longer have the standing army. On September 17th, the Soviet troops invaded Poland from the east. In Battlefield 5, you follow a German tank commander in North Africa and Germany, as well as the Norwegian resistance fighters. They try to stop the German production of heavy water, essential to making nuclear weapons, and destroying German assets in North Africa as a convict drafted into the military by the British. World War II was only brought to an end when Adolf Hitler betrayed Russia and Stalin and invaded the namesake of Stalin, Stalingrad, the city named after him. This caused a Russian outrage as the Russian army then moved into Berlin in 1945 and captured it, and this marked the unconditional surrender of the Nazi Germany to the Allied forces. And while this marked the end of the United States war on the European front, it did not end the war completely, because the United States still had to fight a war in the Pacific. And a quick interesting tidbit about World War II history, Adolf Hitler had an American nephew, William P. Hitler, who served in the United States Navy for 3 years and received a Purple Heart for wounds suffered in combat in defense of the US Navy. Ironic, isn't it? Next we have the Korean War, but there's not been no Battlefield game made about that, so we're going to skip right over that. Next we have the Vietnamese War, and the games made by that were Battlefield Vietnam and Battlefield Bad Company 2 Expansion Vietnam. which neither game featured a campaign, so there wasn't really much of a story going on, but it was based around actual events and actual battles fought in Vietnam. So here's a quick history of the war. It was a proxy war for the United States. The United States supported the South Vietnamese, who were seeking a democratic government, and they were fighting the North Vietnamese, who were communists and backed by China and the Soviet Union. The war was ended when North Vietnamese tanks stormed into Saigon and forced the American troops to evacuate, and ultimately ended the war in Vietnam. Behind these two wars, we have the Cold War going on with Russia. There's a war where no actual weapons were fired and we didn't fight each other in any way, and the official end of the Cold War began when Ronald Reagan tore down the wall in Berlin. Anyways, moving on. We jumped forward about 30 years or so to the early 2000s with Battlefield 2 Modern Combat. Battlefield 2 Modern Combat actually did feature a campaign that was exclusively on console. It was a war between NATO, the People's Liberation Army of China, and the Middle East Coalition. A peace mission happens where diplomats try to get together and a NATO diplomat is killed by an unmarked Hind helicopter. Both sides believe the other did it, and it's revealed a terrorist group bent on world domination did it, and you do as good in Good Samaritan would and go kill the enemy commander, and that's really all that happens in Modern Combat. Next we have Battlefield 3 in the fictional war of 2014 fought in Iraq and Iran. Now this is kind of a lead-in to everything that's going to happen in the future, especially in 2042. You start off as Blackburn, a Marine Corps sergeant in the 1st Recon Battalion, where you try to find and rescue a group of soldiers investigating an IED. The city is then hit by an earthquake, and you're shot over to a different story in Iran at the same time, where you're a fighter pilot fighting the enemy's jets over the airport in Tehran. After positively destroying all the targets with a fighter jet, you then cut back to Blackburn and a group of soldiers who were stuck in the earthquake, who were then sent to do a damage assessment, basically make sure that all the targets got blown up and all the targets that were supposed to be killed were killed. And when you go there, you find the insurgent group has nukes. Not only that, but there's 2 of them missing. Our next scene is as we roll up on a group of tank commanders who are trying to attack the insurgent forces and get back the nukes. They're captured and then executed on live TV. So, that happened. You then cut back to Blackburn, who's now hunting down the insurgent leader. Upon finding him, he reveals that his ally, or his pal, was a CIA asset named Solomon who was actually planning the entire operation from the beginning. This is when you meet Dima, a Russian Special Forces soldier who has learned of the plans to set off the nukes from a black arms dealer who sold them the nukes. Blackburn's officer, who's incompetent and kind of a jerk all around, tries to kill Dima, who is attempting to help you and surrender. Dima raises his hands to surrender, but Blackburn's officer tries to shoot him. And before the officer gets the chance, Blackburn shoots him first to save Dima's life. CIA then captures Blackburn and demands an interrogation of why he just killed his commanding officer, despite the dude being a major dick throughout the entire game. And during the CIA interrogation, the CIA reveals that Solomon is their asset to Blackburn. And because Blackburn does not have tangible proof that Solomon's involvement, the CIA then accuses Blackburn of being brainwashed by Russians because the CIA never gets anything wrong, ever, throughout history. We then cut to playing as Dima in Paris, who's chasing down a nuke, which turns out to be a decoy, and upon the realization, the nuke goes off behind you, and you're exposed to radiation. Back in New York, Blackburn and his buddy break out of confinement, find Solomon, chase him down, which leads to a crash where Solomon kills Blackburn's buddy, and Blackburn then beats Solomon to death with a brick out of, rage. And then he recovers the nuke, and New York is saved, but Paris has still been blown up. And because this is a direct lead into Battlefield 2042, we can assume there's still a high amount of radiation within Paris, and that will be an unplayable area of the world. This all leads into the fictional war of 2020 and the events of Battlefield 4. After the events of Battlefield 3 and the war of 2014, tensions are at an all-time high between the United States and Russia, especially after the nuclear events that destroyed Paris and almost the city of New York. Meanwhile in China, this guy is named Jin Jie. He's a progressive conservative politician trying to lead China into a more democratic government, much like the United States. He is highly opposed by the Chinese military, specifically one Admiral Chang, who attempts to, assassinate him. Not once, but twice. During the campaign, you play as Tombstone Squadron leader Daniel Recker. You are joined by Pac and Irish, who we see in the return in the Battlefield 2042 cinematic. You start by trying to meet a Russian general defecting in Kazakhstan, who has information that Admiral Chang was seeking a war with the United States, allowing him to gain this full support of Russia, who is already tense with the United States. During the first mission, a building collapses on your captain's leg, you have to cut it off, then you drive a car being chased by a Hind helicopter, that you then blow up by hanging outside a car with an underbarrel grenade launcher, while one-handing it. You then kind of crash and drown your captain. Anyways, next mission sees you extracting a high-value target from a tower. Spoiler, it's Jin Jie. By this way, this game is 8 years old, so it's not really a spoiler anymore. You extract Jin-Jae from the roof, and the dickhead CIA agent leaves you on the roof to fend for yourself. As you can see, the emerging trend of the CIA just being dickheads all around, but what's new? You are then forced to extract via civilian pontoon boat when you and a small navy of civilian refugees are struck by an EMP in Shanghai. At this point, Irish, the complete beating heart, leads the civilian refugees back to the Valkyrie while stepping outside the chain of command. You don't do that. When arriving at the Valkyrie, you see it was actually affected by the EMP. You start making your way towards the Titan, another US ship in the area, to learn that the Chinese struck it with an anti-ship missile. You search the ship for information, fight some Chinese soldiers, and then you have to escape on a boat back to the Valkyrie, where the Chinese soldiers have invaded your boat. After fighting them off, you realize the information is actually a target, an airport that's being affected by a typhoon, or as we call it, hurricane. Maybe a possible lead into Battlefield 2042, who knows? Anyways, the Chinese Air Force is grounded at the airport, not being able to take off in a hurricane. Your mission is to go blow them up, and you kind of fail miserably. You're somewhat betrayed by Hannah, and you think Plaque died. You're then sent to a Russian-Chinese prison, where you meet your new cellmate, who is Dima. That's right, the same Dima from Battlefield 3, but he looks like shit. He's worse for wear, and the obvious effects of radiation poisoning are taking a toll on his body. You break out with him and reunite with your squad, and you reunite with the triple-crossing Chinese spy Hannah, who reveals this was all part of her master plan to save you and get Jin-Jae safe. You then break out of the prison on a tram with Dima, Irish, and Hannah, only to have the tram snap on you and kill Dima. And so it's kind of a moot point that he was free for about all of 2 minutes. You're then forced to walk to the nearest vehicle and take the vehicle back to a city that's actually under Russian occupation. After talking to the American forces, you find out the Russian airport is right underneath the dam, so as any American patriot would do, you go blow up the dam and flood the entire airport, destroying all the Russian assets, giving you back air superiority so then you can skyhook out and return to your ship in the Suez Canal. Once you return to the ship, you find it being boarded by Chinese soldiers, again, and after clearing them out, you decide that you're going to take a rib full of C4 to Admiral Chang's warship and blow it up manually, because that's going to be a great freaking idea. Once arriving at the ship, you kind of have to make a decision on who you have to sacrifice, because the C4 does not want to detonate unless it's activated manually. So here are the clips of those endings real quick. And as the credits roll, you hear the voices of whoever you sacrifice indicating that they might not have truly died, which explains Irish's mysterious face scar in the 2042 cinematic. The next chronological story is the story Bad Company in the Russian-American War. This is set in a fictional future which, based off the weapons and vehicles, is before 2042 but after Battlefield 4, and this is set in a fictional country on the Caspian Sea. We follow Preston Marlowe, recently assigned to the B Company of the 222nd Army Battalion, sent out to take out some anti-air batteries, some radar jammers, among other things. And then you encounter the Legionnaire Army, a private military group based off the French Legionnaires of old, and you learn that they're being paid in solid gold bars, which you then verify by finding a solid gold bar on a Legionnaire body, which sets off gold fever among your group. During the next mission, you find a case of gold bars and are sent further into Russian lines, where you find a cargo ship being unloaded and being hauled onto trucks, which makes you believe that there's gold bars in the trucks. But it's actually proven when a gold bar falls out of the truck and your group sees it fall out. At this point, you're basically horn dog crazy for gold bars. After following the trucks to a neutral country, Hager then decides to single-handedly invade that neutral country, which sparks a whole new war between the United States and that country. Shortly after invading this new country, you are captured by American soldiers who send you to assassinate a president supporting the private military group, the Legionnaires. Upon starting the mission, you destroy an AA gun, and then you drive a tank through the president's private golf course, pretty much blowing everything up along the way. You find the president and guarded by Legionnaires. After killing all the Legionnaires, you talk to the president, and you find out the US has basically abandoned you and won't extract you with the president. The president then has the brilliant idea, let's take my private Hind helicopter. Because nothing could go wrong there. Halfway through the flight, you have to refuel because the Hind does not have a huge fuel tank, and fight off some more soldiers, then you get back in the air again, only to get shot down by a pimped out version of a Hind helicopter owned by the Legionnaires. You wake up alone, track down your squad, and the president again and save him from execution. You then find the cargo ship about to take away the gold from the port, only to learn American forces are on the way, so you do as any good American patriot would, and blow up the bridges to slow down your own troops. You then get in a firefight with some mercs, and then find the US is loading up the gold as you speak. To which they ask you if you could drive back one of the trucks full of scrap metal, and at this point you decide it's a good idea to go steal the gold and drive off into the sunset. Which sets us up for Battlefield Bad Company 2, where you're in South America for the Second Russian-American War, with frequent cutbacks to World War II, trying to capture a Japanese scientist who was talking about some weapon called the Black Death. You then cut back to your group, failing to assassinate a Russian officer. After the failed assassination, you're sent back into Russia to find a weapon, which turns out to be the Black Death, but it's not actually there, so just a fake. The general in charge of the mission then sends you to be part of the Special Operations Group, finding that the weapon was a fake, to go find the real one. You then meet up with a CIA asset in South America to find out what happened to the weapon. He explains the weapon's on a satellite, so you go invade the satellite facility and crash the satellite into the nearby country. You then drive cross-country to find out that the satellite actually contained data on the information about the weapon, and the Russian guy you failed to kill and assassinate is actually in charge of the whole operation from the beginning. Your next mission is to go hunt him down, and upon capturing him, as most things happen to the Bad Company group, shit goes sideways and he escapes. You then go to an old ship and find the components of the Black Death, which you give to McGuire, the dick CIA agent, which, hey, it's a big surprise, there's a big trend emerging in this video. Anyways, he betrays you because he was the son of one of the guys who died on the original mission for the Black Death, who believes himself to be in an alliance with Kirilenko, the Russian officer you failed to kill, and Kirilenko betrays him and kills him, and because he was a CIA agent, you kinda assume shit was gonna go sideways anyways. You then fight and escape, and then head to Venezuelan City. The black weapon goes off, killing Russian and US forces, and you see Kirilenko's plane about to take off from an airport. You then drop all your gear to go get on the plane, and manage to get inside. After a long and arduous fight to the cockpit, you see that Kirilenko is locked in the room with a weapon below you. You then blow the glass, destroy the weapon, and try to jump out the plane, only to have one of your teammates tackled by Kirilenko. You then yeet yourself out the plane without a parachute, and as you're falling, you shoot Kirilenko with a pistol. You're thrown a parachute and you land, only to find out you just landed in Texas, where the general finds you and tells you that Russia is actually invading the United States through Alaska, setting up the premise of Battlefield Bad Company 3, which, hey, we still don't have yet. Come on, EA, give us Battlefield Bad Company 3 already. But right now, I'll settle for Battlefield 2042 just because it looks so freaking awesome. This leads us to the 2030s, where a bunch of bad things happen: global catastrophes, food and fuel shortages, a Category 6 hurricane, collapse of governments. I did a whole video over these events, I'll put a link right here, just telling you basically everything that happens in Battlefield 2042 and leading up to it. We then have the Battlefield 2042 cinematic about the displaced people of the collapsed governments, and Irish and Pac who fight each other and then together, and then Pac dies. Which, come on EA, you killed my favorite person from the Battlefield 4 campaign. But you learn there's two sides to the non-Pac group. Oz and his group is hungry for war, and Irish and his group who kind of want to stay peaceful but have to fight to stay peaceful anyways. But anyways, I covered the full story of the cinematic with Pac, Irish, and Oz, and I'm going to put a link to that video right here. And that is the story and timeline leading into 2042. One indication we have about the 2042 story is that each map and season will reveal more and more story, like we've seen in Call of Duty Warzone, where you'll have cinematics tied in with the gameplay. If you feel like I missed anything, tell me, let me know. If you have any questions about any of the characters from Battlefield history, I can give you more information on them. And also, just like, comment, and subscribe. I mean, it really helps YouTube think I make good content, but until next time, stay frosty.